Good afternoon, guys. My name is Gillett with Mudhole Custom Tackle. Today we're going to be going over our new powder pigments. The powder pigments are a lot like our liquid pigments with the exception that they've got a metallic flake to them. They're a little bit easier to use in my opinion, and they don't run. So when you're going to use these pigments, they're going to actually stay separate colors, whereas you can combine our liquid pigments to kind of create your own color combinations or create a unique look that way. These are going to give you a more defined look, and in my opinion, it ends up looking pretty good. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and mix up our epoxy. Today we're using a Pro Coat High Build. This is actually a new product from Pro Coat. It's going to be a little bit higher viscosity than the standard Pro Coat Medium build. I like to use a higher viscosity finish generally because it allows your colors to stay true and not to run. Some people like to experiment with different viscosities, getting different effects that way, but my personal opinion is it's a little bit easier to work with when you have a high build epoxy. So we're going to go ahead and mix up. I would do about 6 cc's of each. That will give you enough to do a butt wrap section and probably a little bit excess, but it's always better to mix up a little bit more than it is less. So we're going to go ahead and mix up our epoxy here. So these syringes here are 3 cc's a piece, and they come with this epoxy. The 2-ounce kit all the way up to the 8-ounce kit. And so I'm just going to do 1 full syringe of each. All right, once we have our epoxy mixed up, we're going to go ahead and separate it into some foiled dishes here, and we're going to, for however many colors we're going to use today, we're going to separate it into that many dishes. So today we're going to be using 4 different colors, so I got 4 different dishes here. And it really doesn't take much, so we're going to put about a nickel size drop in each one. So once we have our epoxy all set up here, we're going to go ahead and start adding in the marbling pigments themselves. We've got 4 different colors here. We've got an orange, a pearl, which is a white pretty much, and then a blue. We also have a black. A black's going to be our base color, and that's what we're going to add our colors into. Despite the fact whether you're working on a black surface or a white surface, I always like to have some sort of base color. It doesn't necessarily have to be black, but to me, I like adding colors into black. It kind of makes them pop. So we're going to take our different pigments here. We're just going to add them in one by one into each of these individual trays. And as you can see, it only takes just a small amount of pigment. Just a little scoop of pigment will go a long way. So these containers should last you a very long time. And once we get the pigments mixed in there, we just mix them into that pre-mixed epoxy. And you can see if the color looks a little bit dull, you can add in a little bit more pigment, but like I said, a little bit usually goes a long way. All right, once we have our colors mixed up, we can begin the marbling process. Like I said, I usually like to lay a base layer down, and today that's going to be a black, but again, that can be pretty much any color you choose. You can even go with clear and add colors to clear, but I definitely recommend putting some sort of base layer down, whether it be a colored finish or just a clear epoxy. So we're going to start out with a black layer here. We're going to just go ahead and paint this on just like you were doing a standard guide wrap or covering up in a butt section area with finish. We're just going to put it down the duration of where we plan on marbling. At this point, we're not really worried about how even the finish is going to come out. It will, just like a regular finish, it will go ahead and level itself out throughout the process. So if you've got some lumps and some bumps, I just really wouldn't pay attention to them at this point. And also, towards the end of the process, if you still have some lumps in your finish, you can let the epoxy set up and let your entire marbling creation set up and go ahead and put another layer on the next day to level it all out. So it's really not that pertinent that you get a level finish during this process. All right, so once we have our black laid down on the actual rod, we can start adding in our colors individually. There's not really a science into how you add these colors in. There's a million different ways to do it, and I definitely recommend that you experiment on some scrap blanks or on a wooden dowel to kind of figure out which method you like. Me personally, I like to add in the pigments kind of in a and just kind of sporadically, and then work with them towards the end. So we can go ahead and start adding in our different colors here, and all right, this is kind of where your imagination can run wild. Once you've got the colors added in, there's a handful of different methods to spread them out and making them kind of blend together, or coming up with some different designs. There's a lot of guys who do flame design. There's a lot of guys who prefer to use a pick set or a spatula set, kind of just to get different effects. That's where I definitely suggest kind of coming up with what you prefer. Me personally today, I like kind of picking through the colors and kind of combining them and making some kind of swirl effects. I think that's what usually comes out the best, but again, that's 100% my opinion. So I'm going to take here, this is basically just a pick set that we offer. It's got a handful of different sizes and different shapes and some different bends that all will get you a different effect. I'm just going to go ahead and use just a standard pick, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the colors just away from each other and towards each other, and just do some different things and come up with some different effects. So what I like to do is start towards the end and just start pulling the colors into each other. And like I had mentioned before, the good thing I like about these powder pigments is they don't necessarily combine and create a mush of color. They tend to stay separate, and it kind of creates some cool effects, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. Another cool tool for marbling here that I've got actually attached to our dryer is what we call Flex Coat rod chuck. It's a slip chuck. And what that is it allows you to stop the actual drying, so you can get in there and do some certain effects without having to try and catch up and trying to work around the actual rod rotating. So it allows me to actually put my hand on the rod, stop it for a second, make whatever moves I'm looking to do here, and then I can let it go and it'll just continue moving. All right, this is pretty much our finished product. Like I said, there's a bunch of different methods that you can use. The one thing that I do suggest is, as you can see, it does kind of create a sloppy edge. It's hard to keep a nice edge. There's a couple different ways to create that straight edge effect. Me personally, I like to start my marbling before where I'm going to put my foregrip if I'm doing it on the butt section. That way I can go ahead and do the marbling and then slide my foregrip down on it. That creates a nice edge using the edge of the cork or the EVA. Or what you can do is you can do the marbling in that area, and once it dries, go back over and use thread to kind of edge it out. That's another method, and regardless, I like to use thread on the front even if I'm using the foregrip slip method. Other than that, that's pretty much it. The other recommendation I make is, as you can see, I've got a nice protective sleeve down just to make sure that I'm not making a mess. I wouldn't recommend doing this on your kitchen counter. I would do it somewhere in the garage where you plan on getting messed, because pretty much where this stuff goes, whether it's on your hands or your shirt, it's going to stay there. So you probably should use colors you like, because it's going to end up all over you. That's pretty much it. They're offered in a handful of different colors, and there's 100 different methods. You can get as creative as you like. The one thing that's unique about it is that every single one you do is going to be different. You're never going to be able to duplicate it. I know people who are doing it on real seats, who are doing it in between guide feet, who are actually doing it on the cork, or they're using it as a butt section. I mean, it's an endless amount of things you can do with the marbling. But that's pretty much it. If you've got any questions, feel free to call our tech support line. We'd definitely like to give you a hand and get you set up. Other than that, we appreciate you watching.